Well, thank you, Paige, and hello, everyone. Today's going to be fun because we'll be hearing from Sean as he tells us what he and his project management staff do on a daily basis, and that's prepare reserve studies. I just want everyone to know they heard that right. Hey, Sean, your office is currently preparing reserve studies at a pace of a little over 1,000 a year. Is that right?
That's correct, Robert. We put a lot of mileage on our cars.
Fantastic. And everyone is different components, which means different expenses and a different starting balance, a different financial background, and so a different reserve funding plan, everyone custom. Well, this is what the situation we find ourselves in. We're doing this presentation because enough of our regular webinar attendees requested something like this. Yes, we read all your comments. You've all got a property to maintain that has many different components. You're trying to make wise decisions as a board. So you need some insights, and that's what you get with a reserve study. This is the outline that we'll be following in today's program, walking you through the process of seeing the steps that we take, all logical and efficient steps, towards completing your reserve study so we can make the wise counsel, give wise counsel, so you can make those wise and informed decisions about how to get successfully into the future. Now, the board is chartered by the association's governing documents to run the association on behalf of the owners. And that means collecting and spending association money to maintain, protect, and enhance the assets of the association. But everything is in a constant state of deterioration, so that's a heck of a challenge. Fortunately, the business judgment rule guides boards protecting their actions if they can demonstrate that they've cared about the association to act in its best interests, and that they've demonstrated loyalty by putting the needs of the association above their own, and then making inquiries when the answer is not patently obvious. And that's where a reserve study fits in, helping boards know what to do now with respect to collecting sufficient funds to maintain those common areas. And there's 3 types of reserve studies defined in National Reserve Study Standards, 3 levels of service. There's a full reserve study that's basically creating from scratch, and 2 different update products, an update with site visit and an update no site visit. Most associations only need to do a full reserve study once, so most of the reserve studies prepared are one of the 2 update products. For today's presentation, Sean's going to be talking about a full reserve study because that's the most exhaustive of the 3. So grab your mouse and click the hands raised icon in your control panel that looks similar to what you see on screen if you're ready for us to go behind the scenes and start showing how a reserve study is prepared. Hands raised. Oh wow, this is a quick group. almost everyone. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to click hands down. Thank you. And here we are. So Sean, tell us, what does preparing for the site inspection look like?
Well, thank you, Robert, and thank you everyone here in attendance for joining us today. There's a lot that goes into the preparation for a site inspection, especially in this situation. We want to focus in on first-time clients who are conducting full reserve studies, also known as level 1 studies. The basic answer that we need to find out is what's actually there on site, and we can't only rely on number of units. We need to determine the type of association, uh, what exactly they are responsible for maintaining. So you can have 1,000-unit association with very limited common areas. That is, quite frankly, a simple reserve study, where a 10-unit apartment may be more complex. So there's some research, and fortunately, we never go to a property without a sneak preview. And here is a great example of what Google Earth can offer. This is a satellite view of a typical condo association. And right off the bat, I know I'm going to need access to that pool area and the pool equipment. And I have a full understanding of the access issues, the type of roofing. So it's a really good sneak preview to the property. And aside from just the overhead view, we can jump into the street view. And now it's very apparent that there's also a vehicle gate and some recently trimmed trees. And, a lot of questions are already popping off in my mind. But, I have a really good understanding of the locked common areas and the other potential areas that may be locked, such as utility rooms. But now I know when I contact the client to schedule the site inspection, how they can better prepare and have all the keys they need and we need to have a successful inspection.
And you've got a good mental image about the challenge ahead, what you're preparing for.
Absolutely. And here we have a typical gated community. This is a very nice entry area with decorative pavers. We're going to give the security company a heads up that we are conducting an inspection of all common areas, and we need access to that security station, the guard station, and we'll be taking photos of their camera monitoring system. So, by getting a sneak preview of the property, there's virtually no surprises when we get there. We'll be fully prepared, the client's prepared, and all parties involved will be ready for our arrival. And this is the same property, but from a much higher angle. And right away, I'm getting a firm grasp on the total scope. I realize off the bat that asphalt is going to be the most significant reserve liability for this association. I know that this is a PUD after reading the governing documents and talking with the client. So these tennis courts you see off to the side, these are actually backyard tennis courts, not common area. So that will not be on the scope of the work. But however, at the very top of the hill, there is a common area rec center. And so that is another area we'll need access to. And we're going to discuss that water tower before we get to the property, just to make sure that that's the responsibility of the local municipality and not the HOA. If it is HOA, we're going to need to get access to that area as well. And here we have a standard apartment style complex in Southern California. So things that are jumping off the screen for me is there's a pool inspired area to the left, and to the right in the smaller courtyard, there's definitely a standalone spa. So I'm going to need access to both areas, both equipment rooms. The roofs are possibly entirely flat roof. It might have mansard roofs on the side, but it's a lot of flat roofs, and this is going to be a very significant reserve asset for this property. They have connection points, which is easier for us as we navigate the roofs, but those connection points also will represent breezeway walkways below. So there's definitely common area decks. And jumping to a 3D view of the exact same property, we can confirm that this property does have a lot of balcony decking on the side. So that will be a primary point of focus, especially the maintenance responsibilities and the project history, if they are association responsibility. We confirm with this view that the roofs are connected with these little connection bridges, which is helpful, and the roofs have stairwell access. So that's helpful for us, but some of these stairwells are alarmed and we need a key to still access them. So we don't ever want to show up to a property totally blind and then realizing that we don't have enough we don't have the common area keys available because we didn't do our job and give the client a fair warning. So if there's rec rooms, if there's laundry rooms, if there's a gym, we're going to have a good idea or at least verify whether or not those are on site, and we'll give the client a heads up that these are all the possible access issues we may encounter to be able to complete this inspection on the first go.
Yeah, and you're probably clicking off a timer in your head thinking, okay, roofing, painting, asphalt, balconies, two different to pool, spa areas. You're clicking off preparing basically mentally how long you're going to spend on site and one man or two man, all those kinds of things?
Absolutely. A first time site inspection of a property this size, this would definitely be a two-person team, and we would divide up the work to be as efficient as possible.
Excellent.
And so, we come to the site prepared. We don't want any disruption for the client on site. We definitely don't want to have to schedule a follow-up inspection, because that's burdensome for the client. And with these satellite tools, for years, for decades, the reserve study site inspection always begins with the in-person intro meeting. And now with the tools available with Google Earth, with virtual meetings such as Zoom, there are certain properties where conducting your intro meeting before the inspection date virtually is actually more beneficial. We'll give you a quick demonstration of that.
Okay, rolling video now.
Hi there. I just wanted to illustrate for you the potential benefits for some properties of conducting the intro meetings with their reserve study specialist on virtual platforms instead of the traditional in-person meetings. Here we have a large property up in Central California. The local summer climate routinely has triple-digit temperatures. This is also a 55 and over community. And instead of walking the entire property together, we decided to do an intro meeting on Zoom a few days before the site inspection. And aside from covering the basics of, property boundaries and amenities and, locations of entry areas, we got into a lot of specifics. And this was much easier on a virtual platform. I can bring up the street names and we discuss terminology. Do you refer to the entry gates as the Traditions and Esplanade gates or as the West and East gates? That way I can customize the component titles to make it much easier for them to understand. A board member pointed out that the northwest perimeter here has unique fencing, so we decided to drop in and take a look. And what's unique about it is the only wood fencing here at the property. The rest is metal. So that was really good to know. And then another board member brought up the important point that the perimeter does not end here at these unit backyards, but extends all the way down to the road. So all of these acres of hillside are the responsibility of the association. And another board member brought up a good point that hidden way down here in the corner is a drainage culvert that hardly anyone knows about, but the association is responsible for its maintenance and clean out. So we did another street view pop in. And in a matter of minutes, we covered some really interesting highlights of the common areas, hidden sort of aspects, which saved us probably at least an hour of hiking around the property perimeters down this dangerous country road in triple digit temperatures. And when we zoomed in on the amenities of the clubhouse, now we can see that, oh, there's actually flat roof portions, which we discussed. And then one of their upcoming projects entails the replacement of pool trellises. Well, it turns out it's only two of them, not four of them. So we were able to pinpoint exactly which wood structures were going to be involved in the project. So again, all of this was accomplished in a matter of minutes rather than walking the whole property in this dry, hot climate. And I think the findings under these comfortable circumstances were much more accurate and comfortable. And we didn't have to backtrack, realizing that we didn't actually discuss something back here in one corner. Uh, we were able to complete the intro meeting virtually in 1 hour, which would have probably taken 3 hours in person to when you factor in all of the walking. So this was accomplished before the site inspection. I was able to pick up the common area keys. A few days later, start early in the morning and go straight to work, which saved everyone a lot of time.
Well, thanks, Sean. I felt like I was there with you, and you're right. It's a lot easier to do that from the convenience of your office with the board members and the manager in their air-conditioned spaces, and literally zooming from location to location.
Correct, and also being fully caught up to speed on the intricacies of the property days before arriving, not as you arrive. The first hour of the inspection. You come with all that in hand, so it's very helpful in certain situations for the right type of property.
Yeah, and for a property that's going to be a bit of a drive, you know if it is going to be a one-man job, two-man job, and you're already set with what have you been doing, those questions about the shade structures by the pool, the last minute, oh, I forgot to tell you about like that drainage culvert, who you're meeting, when, being able to do all that in advance and making sure that it takes a day or two or more sometimes to get the right key from the right person for the right room. And so you're able to wonderfully do all that prep in advance. So that's a great advantage of having some of these online tools.
Exactly. And so, we will form a team in many situations and, strategize on how best to approach the site inspection. Sometimes, perhaps I owe Johannes to the exteriors, because he did the roads up in Palmdale last week and it was 100 degrees. So, we're going to divide up the work efficiently to make sure that we're not overlapping, but we also we have a system in place to where we understand exactly the scope of work that, or the scope of the property that we are covering, and so there's also no blind spots.
Yeah, and that's going with the strength of the staff too, because you may have someone who is a whiz on mechanical assets, someone who is an expert on golf courses, and you've got a team here that you can uh, draw from to make sure that you put the right person on the ground.
Exactly, and we do draw upon their talents at this time. Our newest member of the staff has been with the team for 4 years, so we don't place any staff members in situations that they haven't been exposed to already. Our senior staff members will likely be assigned more complex jobs such as high rises or resort timeshares, or properties with very, very heavy mechanical.
Well, thanks, Sean. That's a great overview of what happens in the prep. There's a lot of interaction with the client. It's not just saying thank you for the go ahead and then taking the ball and running with it. It seems like it's a real coordinated effort. So,
Exactly.
okay. So, Sean, talk to us for a few minutes about what actually performing the site inspection looks like.
Certainly. So there I am in my site inspection garb. We wear safety vests. Thank you, OSHA. We come prepared with our iPad, which will give us a lot of additional tools while on site. We can create custom images of certain buildings or sections of the property or pool areas as we go along and use that as we document measurements and notes. We have our cameras on us, measuring wheel to the side. Within these vest pouches is a backup battery, a laser measuring device, and gloves if rooftop ladders are involved.
Or
So,
dirty?
we're, yeah, yeah, very hot ladders. You need protection on this on the skin of your hands, and we get asked a lot if we are appraisers or the cable company or the gas company, but we want to be very visible. We don't want to be conspicuous. And if anyone has any concerns, we'll gladly stop in our tracks and answer their questions. And it's always one of those things like, who would claim to be doing reserve studies, who was not?
It takes an explanation, but you do look very professional. You do like you look like you belong there, and you're clearly conducting yourself, measuring, photographing, and not bugging people. And it is a very peaceful thing that you do.
It is. And so, with the client's time in mind and trying to be as considerate as possible, we will always request to start with the locked, restricted areas first, such as a rec room or the mechanical rooms or a pool area, we want to get those done first because this will take about 30 to 60 minutes. But after that, the person we meet with on site can then cut us loose and they can move on with their day. And we can finish up the inspection on our own if the property has open common areas such as this townhome association. The client doesn't need to walk with me as I walk around the buildings and measure the roads, and they can get on with their day. We'll be on site for a few more hours. But yeah, that's why we really prepare up front. We want to give the client a good expectation on how to prepare so they don't waste any time along with us. They're able to cut us loose promptly and move on with their day.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this and I'm realizing that there's a little bit of a coordination between the site inspection and the financial analysis because you're going to spend more time on the things that are more expensive. Is that typically the case?
Sure. That there are critical components with every property type, and with like this townhome association, I know up front that the roofs, the exterior paint, and the asphalts are going to be the three most critical components on their reserve study. So, we are going to walk the entire property to confirm if the conditions are the same throughout or if there's been phases completed. But we really honestly, it's sometimes better to then move on solo because you can actually focus on the task at hand and conduct a more thorough inspection that way. And here we have some telltale signs of damage, and a big question is it consistent with age? Are these tile roofs new but showing heavy damage? Has this carpeting recently been replaced, but is it already showing the wear and tear and staining? If the assets have already reached a full useful life, then these are normal sort of deterioration patterns. But if they are recent replacements, we need to figure out what is happening, why it's happening, and perhaps consider applying a shorter useful life for these assets for this particular property. So as we document all of the various common area components, to the left, you can see I'm using a laser measuring device, which is great for interior measurements. It doesn't work well outside because you can't actually find the laser at the end of your point of measurement in the sunlight. So outside, we're going to be using the measuring tool, the measuring wheel. And aside
Sean,
from
let me
measuring,
stop you there.
yeah.
Don't you often come in advance knowing pretty much your measurements based on your satellite tools? So you're doing confirmation here, not just discovery?
Yeah, exactly. So, the satellite measuring tools are very accurate. And so there are some shortcomings. Perhaps there's trees that are in the way, but if as long as there hasn't been any phased work done that we're seeing on site, we can use the satellite measuring tools, and then we just on site just need to take some sample measurements to confirm the road width is matching up with the satellite measurements. But
Got it.
they are very accurate. And then aside from measuring, we are counting fixtures such as light fixtures. Here I'm confirming the number of stops for this elevator system and also confirming what type of system it is, hydraulic versus a traction. And that's a huge difference in pricing between those two elevator system types. And lastly, with digital cameras, we can take a lot of photos, and taking a photo of the equipment tags is a lot easier than trying to write down these long model numbers and serial numbers. But we can get a lot of information from these tags, such as the manufacturer date, as well as the equipment specs. So for boilers and heaters, we can get the BTUs. For air conditioners, we can get the cooling capacity. We can get the kilowatts of transformers and generators. So a lot of information can easily be obtained just by one push of the camera. And it even helps us confirm actual replacement history. So we've had situations where clients will tell us, the pool filter was replaced last year, but looking at the tag, it's still the 10-year-old model. And it turns out that project was only a replacement of the filter cartridges, not the actual filter itself. So, we will document as much manufacturer information as we can get our access to, really.
Excellent.
And here, this is a example of what a typical um, site inspection no, I should just say note taking will look like on our end. This is a situation where we are updating a prior study, and so we're going to use the prior component list as a checklist. But before the inspection, I went through and highlighted all the projects that are either due for completion here in yellow, or that were reported to be completed recently. This was reported during their recent no site visit update. We want to definitely confirm all these projects that are highlighted in orange were completed as planned, because the information could be a year old, and pandemic comes along and changes everyone's plans. You can see that I've marked up some useful lives for adjustments. Some useful lives will be shortened, others will be extended. Same goes for the remaining lives. And you can see the cooling tower, I've noted that they have proposals. And so that will be a really interesting, critical follow-up question, because I want to take a look at those proposals and make sure that the reserve study is, providing an accurate replacement cost based on what they're actually getting from their service providers. And before we leave the property, we're going to go through the list and make sure we covered all the bases.
Yeah, and make sure you basically have a mental checklist of I've seen everything I need to see, and I am now good to go, turn my camera off and go to the car.
Exactly.
But that's not the end of the project. That's the end of that site inspection, but perhaps the beginning of the next phase.
Sure, and that's a common question. A lot of clients are hoping to get their hands on the study the next day. Usually, in the 8-week process, the inspection is completed by week 2, which means we have 6 more weeks of work to go on that reserve study. So here's an example of the typical homework involved, and we need to work with the property manager or the board as a team. And so these are, common follow-up questions. The building two's roof looks better than the others. Tell us about that project history. The asphalt is dry and still overdue for completion. Have you received any bids? Do you handle tree trimming as an operating expense or reserves? These are classic examples of the type of follow-up questions you may expect.
Well, I think that's a real eye opener. So thank you very much. And now there's an issue that not only you have homework, but the client sometimes has homework. Please tell me about. So is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And if it is a long ledger of project history, feel free to forward it to me and I'll do the digging. But if the information is available, we want to get to it one way or another, because we want to apply it to the reserve study and make it as accurate as possible.
Fantastic. It seems like it's a real interactive process combining your knowledge of property technical type of things and the background that the manager and the board has from dealing with the property on a daily, weekly basis. So that's a great combination. Okay, now it's time to talk about the process of finishing up the report. What does finishing up a reserve study actually look like?
So once we get the answers in hand, that's a big step. We're going to start applying these specific details, project history details, to the foundation of the reserve study, which is the inventory, and that's the component list. And having the project history costs, we can note in the inventory where this cost came from, or whether it came from vendor research or other current bids. And getting the answer regarding the roof issue, it wasn't a planned project. This is a reason why, due to a tree falling on that building. But at least we know that the roofs installed on the other buildings of the same age shouldn't expect, an early decline, just based on the elements. This was a special situation.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad batch of material. And same thing with the pool furniture. Just because they bought it for $5,400 this last year doesn't mean that it's a $5,400 value. They got a special deal because it was a pandemic year.
Exactly. So we'll, for future replacements, we'll apply the $8,000 value.
Right. And that's that expertise that you bring to the table.
And so resolving homework questions, you can see, hopefully you can see on my computer that piece of mechanical, that is the hoist of a traction elevator system. And so, we're going to be reaching out to service vendors, and it's always helpful as part of the reserve study process to give them a heads up, because some may be leery of sharing information on the systems with outside companies. They may suspect we're actually a secret competitor, but for an elevator system, we really want to speak with Thyssen and Krupp and Amtech and Otis, because they are the specialists for that particular system. And we don't do testing, we don't do load tests on elevators, and we don't test your fire alarm system. Thank goodness we don't do that. We don't want
Although it
to
might be fun.
yeah, in theory. But so we have additional homework on our end, and we just need the name of your service rep and their contact info. And it really does help, because as we all know, the pricing trends can fluctuate dramatically, and these guys have the best up-to-date info on local pricing trends. And so, we're not, we didn't want to give a false presentation. The quantities taken on site, they're not, they're not a thing of beauty. They just need to be accurate. So this is what the typical measurements page will look like for common areas. The conditions will be on a separate page. But as long as these are accurate, that's what we need to document. And so, yeah, this is a good example. Um, the last part of the puzzle is usually the calculation of the starting reserve fund balance on your reserve study. And this is an upcoming projection, because we almost always work on reserve studies before the start of your upcoming fiscal year. In this situation, this is a May 1st fiscal year client. So we're going to take the February reserve balance, plug in the remaining contributions for the year, and subtract any known approved reserve expenses. And that will get us our May 1st reserve balance. Those approved expenses will be accounted for also on the component list as completed projects. And, that will get us as close to the absolute perfect bullseye as we can.
Yeah, and sometimes that's on the phone and sometimes that's email correspondence.
Absolutely. And yeah, this is a classic example of, if anything slips your mind, feel free to reach out for any revisions. We understand that there's a lot of properties to deal with for property managers, or it's easy to forget about, a $1,500 painting project or an asphalt seal coat, or sometimes even planned projects. It's not something apparent that we can visualize from the inspection, but oh, I forgot to mention we are going to reseal the asphalt again in 2 months before our fiscal year begins. So that needs to be accounted for. And so moving on from the physical analysis, to wrap that up, we're going to input all those findings into the inventory. You can see all the photos on the right-hand screen there that I took on site. We take a lot of photos. We want to be as thorough as possible, and we'll select the best ones for your inventory. And to give you a clean presentation of, the quantities, the location, project history, and the big key here for all components, useful life, remaining life, and current costs.
Yeah, so taking all those raw field notes and finally distilling it into something nice and clean, and you actually get the nice component list from this.
Certainly. And so moving on to the financial analysis, we customize all funding plans to your property. There isn't a magical per unit per month reserve contribution that we just apply. The primary goals based on National Reserve Study standards, the reserve funding principles, are sufficient cash so you can complete any reserve project on schedule, a stable contribution rate, which the owners will just love because they can have a reasonable expectation of their annual expenses for the association that year, and to spread the costs evenly over the life of each component. You want to distribute that equally among the useful life, so all owners share the same burden. You don't have a unlucky group of owners getting hit with all the big projects at once, while years of prior owners paid nothing into the reserves. And we want to be fiscally responsible, and Robert touched upon that in his intro slides.
And then you get from the theory into the reality. So this is where you do your work.
Exactly, and you can see we have a lot of charts on the same screen to refer to as we are trying different funding plans, and we are trying multiple scenarios, trying to find the best fit. We're trying to give you and your residents the easiest prescription, for lack of a better word, but the goal isn't to be 100% funded for the sake of being 100% funded after 1 year. You can see in the upper right chart, the green line is our recommended funding plan. It's a very gradual approach, and if you are completing projects on time, have sufficient cash flow with a low risk of special assessment, then we can take our foot off the pedal and do a gradual approach. So we know that assessment increases are not good news for the owners, and we want to give the board a plan that they can sell to the ownership and rally support behind it.
But even so, there's always a different way to, as my mom would say, more than one way to skin a cat. And that's why we have our UPlanet tool. And that's a way for boards, managers, for our end users to be able to do their own what if analysis and test a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, earlier or later, more aggressive or less aggressive. So please join us for a UPlanet demo. It's a webinar that we'll be doing Tuesday, June 29. And then, Sean, you take this, and then it's a matter of communicating the results to the client.
Exactly. They're going to get the published report and the key document. The executive summary is a great file to open up first, and then you can dig into more details in the photo inventory with the site inspection comments and all the charts and 30-year projections. You'll find all the funding plan nuances, such as the annual increases for future contributions used on the reserve study. And here's an example of what a published reserve study will look like. And you'll have access through a secure login portal, password protected, which also gives you the ability to share access to the files with whomever you wish.
Yeah, and once you're logged in, that's where you'll find UPlanet, and it's all there. So it's not like it's one PDF that the board is pushing around from one person to another. It's a nice central place to have all this documentation. Well, thank you, Sean. That's been a great description of the way a custom reserve study is prepared, and all according to National Reserve Study Standard principles. There's, as you summarize, a number of different client touch points, and it does end with a reserve study directed towards answering that question that boards always have: what do I do now? And so that's what we do here at Association Reserves. That's our role, to guide our association clients successfully to the future. We will help them find, as you saw here, the answers to their main questions. What do we reserve for? And that's the component list. Do we have enough? Sean talked a little bit about gathering the financial information and then crafting that funding plan. Where do we go from here? And we want to encourage you to stay the course. It's a multi-year journey. It'll have some twists and turns along the way, some big expenses, some low expenses, but stay that course and lead your association, because the destination is a financially secure association with sufficient funds to do your projects on time, maximizing owner enjoyment and property values. And if you need more information, by all means, go to www.reservestudy.com. We've got a deep library of additional resources, videos, articles, webinar history, also an ability for you to click a request a proposal link and get a proposal for your association if you'd like to have us on your side working with you, getting to the future. Upcoming webinars, we've got a couple of new ones here. Reserve Studies 103, the funding plan. We'll talk all about funding plan nuances. We'll spend an entire webinar just on the funding plans. And then as I indicated earlier, June 29, UPlanet user training. It's a great new tool that we have, this UPlanet. It's free with every completed reserve study that we prepare. It's a nice, simple online calculator. No additional cost. It comes with your professional reserve study. And we also have one additional resource. It's a great hand along, pass along, or desktop reference, Understanding Reserves. You can order it direct from Amazon. And if you have a desire to get something like this for your management company or an entire board of directors, you can handle bulk orders from our website at reservestudy.com. So at this time, that's the end of our prepared content. I'd like to turn the microphone over to Paige, who will coordinate our Q&A time together. Paige.